Welcome to the deep dive. Today we've got quite a collection of sources. We're looking at articles, notes, research, all about Sangam literature.
Mhm.
And specifically, it's really fascinating connection to ancient Kerala.
Right.
So our mission here is to basically dive into this material, see what we can pull out. What were things really like in, the area of modern Kerala, maybe 2,000 years ago, seen through this very early Tamil literature?
And the context, I think, is pretty important here. We're talking Sangam literature, so roughly, say, 300 BCE to 300 CE.
Okay.
What makes it quite unique, especially for that time, is that it's overwhelmingly secular, not primarily religious texts.
Interesting.
So it gives us this, well, relatively unfiltered glimpse into the social world, the culture of ancient Tamilakam. And that region definitely included modern Kerala, mainly under the Chera kings back then.
Right.
People often call it a golden age of Tamil creativity. You could say why it's, one of the few really indigenous South Indian voices we have from that early on.
Okay, so let's really try and unpack this then. These texts, they look at this world ruled by the Cheras, sometimes called Kerala Putras, right?
Exactly.
What sort of specific things do they tell us about the actual land, the people living there?
They give us a pretty vivid picture, actually. The sources clearly place the Chera lands between the Western Ghats, those big mountains, and the Arabian Sea.
Okay.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is this Tinai concept. You find it detailed in works like Tolkappiyam, the grammar text.
Pinai, what's that exactly?
It's more than just geography. It was like a whole framework where different landscapes, the mountains, the coast, forests, farmland, even the drier zones, they were seen as deeply connected to specific human feelings, jobs, ways of life. So like mountains meant hunting and interestingly secret love. The coast was fishing and maybe the sorrow of separation.
Wow.
It shows this incredibly sort of deep ecological awareness, how the land itself shaped everything about life.
That connection, land and life, that's really insightful. But okay, looking through these sources, the thing that really jumps out at me is the economy. They paint a picture of a place that was seriously connected to the wider world.
Oh, absolutely. That's where it gets really exciting. The descriptions we have of Muziris, that famous Chera port, they're quite stunning.
Muziris. Right.
The sources talk about well-built crafts of the Yavanas. That's their word for foreigners, likely Roman or Greek traders.
It's not that. Okay.
And these ships were arriving packed with gold. Not just a little bit, heaps of it, specifically to trade for local stuff like pepper.
Ah, the black gold.
Exactly. That's what the Romans craved. Pepper, spices, pearls, maybe gems too. There's this one description, it's really striking. It talks about houses near the port just overflowing with sacks of pepper.
Houses overflowing.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Local boats constantly going back and forth, ferrying gold coins from the big Yavana ships anchored offshore.
Yeah.
It just highlights the sheer scale of this trade. I mean, this was a major hub in ancient global commerce, not just some local market, a huge influx of wealth.
That image. Houses full of pepper, boats of gold. That really brings it home. Okay, so beyond trade, what about the society? The people themselves, their values. What do the texts say?
Well, the social setup seems pretty varied, complex, but one tradition that really stands out in these sources is the Nadukal tradition, hero stones.
Hero stones, like memorials.
Exactly. They were set up for warriors who died in battle. But the texts say they weren't just markers. People actually worshiped these stones.
Worship them.
It points to this really profound focus on heroism, on martial skill, loyalty, especially maybe among certain warrior groups. And it seems to connect back to even older megalithic traditions in that area. So you see this continuity.
Interesting. So strong local traditions, this warrior ethos. What about their spiritual life? Was it all local gods or were other ideas coming in?
It was definitely dynamic. A blend, really.
Huh.
The sources mention indigenous gods like Murugan, god of mountains and war, and Koravai, kind of victory goddess.
Okay.
But they also show, bit by bit, other beliefs arriving. Jainism, Buddhism, early forms of Brahmanical Hinduism, they were filtering in. Probably helped along by those same trade routes, right?
Makes sense. Trade brings ideas too.
Yeah. And while these Sangam poems aren't, religious scriptures, you get glimpses of this mixing, like the Patini cult, venerating Kannagi for her chastity and power. Even if the main story comes later, sources often link its beginnings or patronage to King Sengkutuvan, showing how indigenous beliefs were evolving, maybe interacting with new ideas about virtue and female power.
So kind of a melting pot of beliefs starting to form alongside these strong local traditions.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's pull this together. We've looked at the land, the amazing trade, the values, the spiritual mix. Why does digging into all this ancient stuff matter for you listening today? Why care about pepper and gold from 2,000 years ago?
Well, I think it matters hugely because this literature, it gives us a unique voice from South India, from that period.
Mhm.
Often we have to rely on outsiders like Greek or Roman writers talking about the trade.
Right, the view from the outside.
Exactly. This gives us an inside view. It shows the deep roots of Kerala's own distinct culture, that connection to the land, its really early importance in global trade, its place in the bigger South Indian story. A perspective that sometimes gets a bit lost if we only focus on North Indian history. It shows a sophisticated, complex society already connected to the world.
Yeah, it really does feel like this deep dive into Sangam literature acts almost like a bridge, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Connecting us back to that really vibrant, complex, ancient world on the Malabar coast.
It absolutely does. And maybe, just a final thought to leave you with. Consider this. How might that ancient mix, that really deep-rooted local culture, alongside those huge international trade links like at Muziris, and that blending of different spiritual ideas coming in, how might all that, happening way back then, have actually laid the groundwork for the kind of unique, diverse, maybe even cosmopolitan cultural identity that Kerala is known for even today? Something to maybe ponder.